I almost didn't open it. It was just a text. No emojis, no explanation. Just one sentence that made my stomach tighten before I even understood why. I hope one day you see what you couldn't see with me. Before we begin, please support MindShift Stories by subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a comment. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories with the world. It was a Tuesday night, nothing dramatic. I was on my couch, half watching a show I'd already seen before, half scrolling through my phone. That's usually how my evenings went back then. Distracted, but convinced I was relaxing. I had just gotten home from work. Same routine, same complaints, same quiet sense that something in my life felt off, but not off enough to do anything about it. At that time, I thought I understood people pretty well. I believed that was logical, rational, fair, especially in relationships. If something didn't work, I'd tell myself it just wasn't a good fit. If someone was upset, I'd think they're overreacting. If there was tension, I'd assume it was miscommunication. I prided myself on being calm. Looking back, I think I confused calmness with emotional distance. The text was from Maya. We had broken up 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't explosive, no yelling, no cheating, just a quiet ending. At least that's how I described it. We'd been together for almost 2 years. Toward the end, she kept saying she felt unseen. I remember that word clearly because it annoyed me. Unseen? I showed up. I paid attention. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I wasn't dramatic. What more does she want? I thought she was asking for something unreasonable, some vague emotional thing I couldn't measure or fix. When we broke up, I told myself it was mutual, healthy, mature. But that night, staring at that text, I felt something I didn't want to admit. Confusion. I hope one day you see what you couldn't see with me. What couldn't I see? I typed 3 different replies and deleted them all. What are you talking about? That's not fair. I tried. Each one felt defensive. I didn't send anything. Instead, I put my phone down. But I couldn't shake the sentence. I kept replaying our last few months together in my head. There were small moments I had ignored, like the night she told me about her presentation at work. She was nervous. I remember half listening while answering emails. I said, "You'll be fine. You always are." It sounded supportive, efficient, but I never asked why she was nervous. Or the time she mentioned feeling distant from her sister. I gave her advice immediately, practical solutions, steps to fix it. She got quiet after that. I assumed she didn't want advice. It never occurred to me she might have wanted something else. Over the next few days, the text kept resurfacing in my mind. At work, in the car, even in conversations with friends. It was like a quiet echo. I started noticing something uncomfortable. I didn't really ask questions, not real ones. If someone shared a problem, I jumped to solutions. If someone shared emotions, I translated them into logic. If someone expressed disappointment, I defended myself internally before they even finished speaking. I had always seen that as strength. Now, it felt like avoidance. One evening, I did something small but unusual for me. I scrolled back through old messages between Maya and me. I wasn't looking for proof I was right. At least I told myself I wasn't. But as I read them, a pattern appeared. She'd send something vulnerable. I'd respond with reassurance or correction. She'd say, "I feel like you don't really hear me sometimes." I'd reply, "That's not true. I always listen." She'd say, "I miss how close we used to feel." I'd reply, "Nothing's changed. You're overthinking." At the time, I thought I was stabilizing things. Now I wondered if I was invalidating her experience without realizing it. That thought unsettled me. I didn't see myself as dismissive. I saw myself as grounded. But what if I was just uncomfortable with emotions I couldn't control? A week after the text, I ran into her by accident at a coffee shop. It wasn't dramatic. We both froze for a second too and then did that polite half-smile adults do when they don't know what version of themselves to be. We talked, surface level at first. Work, mutual friends, the weather. There was a moment of silence and I almost let it pass. That would have been the old me. Avoid the deeper thing. But something inside me didn't want to leave with the same question still hanging in the air. So I said, "About that text, what did you mean?" She looked surprised, not defensive, just surprised. Then she said something simple that landed heavier than I expected. "I don't think you ever realized how often I felt alone next to you." Alone next to me. I remember my chest tightening. "I was there," I said automatically. She nodded. Physically, yes. There was no anger in her voice. That almost made it worse. "I didn't need you to fix things," she continued. "I just needed you to sit in them sometimes with me." Sit in them with me. I didn't respond right away. For once, I didn't rush to defend. Instead, I noticed something uncomfortable inside myself. I hated sitting in difficult emotions, even my own. If I felt stressed, I distracted myself. If I felt hurt, I minimized it. If I felt uncertain, I looked for control. So when she brought emotions to me, I treated them like problems to solve instead of experiences to share. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to stay. That realization felt like the turning point. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no cinematic apology. Just a quiet shift in perspective. For the first time, I wasn't asking, was I right? I was asking, what was it like to be with me? That question changed everything. After that conversation, we didn't get back together. That wasn't the point. But I started noticing my behavior in other areas of my life. At work, when a colleague vented about being overwhelmed, I caught myself about to say, "Just prioritize better." Instead, I asked, "What's been the hardest part?" With my younger brother, when he talked about feeling stuck, I resisted the urge to map out a plan for him. I just listened. And something surprising happened. People talked longer. They opened up more. They relaxed. I realized how often I had been listening to respond rather than listening to understand. There's a difference. Listening to respond is about protecting your identity. It's about proving you're right, capable, logical. Listening to understand requires something harder. It requires vulnerability. It requires admitting you might not fully see someone else's experience. That text forced me to confront a hidden truth about myself. I wasn't as emotionally available as I thought I was. I had built an identity around being steady and rational, but underneath that was discomfort with emotional uncertainty. I thought empathy meant agreement, or solutions, or reassurance. But sometimes empathy is just presence, just staying. Months later, I started dating someone new. Early on, she told me about a conflict she was having with her boss. I felt that familiar urge to analyze. Instead, I paused. "I'm sorry that feels heavy," I said. "Do you want advice, or do you just want me to listen?" She smiled. "Just listen." And I did. It felt awkward at first. I worried I wasn't adding value. That's how my brain framed it. But the conversation felt closer, more connected. And I understood something deeper about human behavior. We don't always want solutions. We want to feel seen in our experience. That was the thing I couldn't see with Maya. Not because she didn't explain it, but because my assumptions filtered it out. I assumed love meant stability. I assumed support meant answers. I assumed calm meant healthy. But perspective shifts rarely come from dramatic events. Sometimes they come from one sentence that lingers longer than we expect. I hope one day you see what you couldn't see with me. At first, I interpreted that as blame. Now I see it as clarity. She wasn't accusing me of being cruel. She was pointing to a blind spot. We all have them. Psychologically, it's easier to maintain a self-image than to question it. It's easier to say they were too emotional than to ask, was I emotionally distant? It's easier to fix than to feel. But growth doesn't happen in the comfortable version of ourselves. It happens in those quiet moments when something unsettles our perception. That text changed my life forever, not because it brought someone back, but because it forced me to look inward instead of outward. It made me examine my decisions, my assumptions, my reflexes in conversations. It made me realize that being right is different from being connected. And connection requires something that logic alone can't provide: presence. If you asked me today what the biggest life lesson was, I wouldn't say communicate better or be more empathetic. I'd say this: pay attention to the patterns you defend most quickly. There's usually something there. The next time someone says they feel unseen, don't rush to prove them wrong. Pause. Ask yourself what it feels like to be on the other side of you. That question is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. I still think about that text sometimes, not with regret, not with guilt, but with gratitude. Because sometimes the messages we don't want to receive are the ones that reveal the hidden truth we've been avoiding. And sometimes the most important perspective shift doesn't come from losing someone. It comes from finally seeing what they were trying to show you all along. So here's what I'll leave you with. In your closest relationships, are you listening to fix or listening to understand? The answer might change more than you expect.